here today to do another installment in my end of the year videos. This video is my top 10 least favorite reads of 2019. Not that I would say that any of these books are bad. I know a lot of people really like them. They just were not the books for me, and I did not enjoy reading through them because of that. I will start at the bottom of my list and work my way up to my least favorite read of 2019. So starting at number 10, we have The Kiss of Deception by Mary E. Pearson. This book was also on my DNF list, and the reason I didn't like it was because I was the wrong audience for it. I was definitely not the reader audience that the book was aimed at, and as such, my enjoyment really was reflected in that. And I'm putting it on this list because it's the best representation of all the DNFs I had this year as to why I didn't finish them and why I didn't like them. My 9th least favorite read this year was Mythago Wood by Robert Holdstock. I did do a full kind of book of the month book club review for it. I'll include a link above and below if you're interested in watching it. And this specifically was just one of my least favorite fantasy reads. It wasn't even necessarily a really bad book. I think I gave it something like 3 out of 5 stars or 2.5 out of 5 stars, something like that. And it just wasn't my favorite fantasy book, and that's just because I had a year that had some really, really good fantasy novels in it, and so just by comparison, it just wasn't as good as I would have hoped. Moving on to number 8. This is Sleep by Nino Ricci. I actually read this while I was on vacation in Mexico, and man, this book was a ride. Psychotic, kind of illness-induced spiral of a professor slash like former famous guy. Like in the world he studied in, he was pretty famous for some books he wrote early on, and this is just his life kind of after the fact when he's on a downslide. And it was weird, and I didn't enjoy it that much. I know some people have enjoyed it based on the reviews I read, but man, it was just strange, and I didn't really care for it because of that. Bumping up to 7, my next book is Warcross by Marie Lu. And this one was hard to put on this list because there were things I really liked about it, but there were things that I really didn't enjoy as well. Kind of the tropes used and the twists revealed just really missed the mark for me, and I was hoping it would go in a different way, and it definitely went in the way I feared. And even though I started off really excited about this book, especially in the first few chapters, by the time I got to the end, I didn't like it, and I'm probably not going to pick up the sequel to try to finish it. Moving on to 6. That is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I've also listed this on my most disappointing reads of 2019 list. And this was such a hyped book, and a lot of people really, really liked it. In fact, I checked today and it's still like really highly rated on Goodreads, and I just could not get behind it. It had the base of all the things I like. It had like a fantasy school setting. It had really interesting lore and culture and history that it was drawing from. The way it was presented was just not a way I enjoy reading that kind of setting. Although I did enjoy a lot of the school setting, after they left the school setting, which they fast forwarded to, like very strangely fast forwarded through, I didn't enjoy the stuff once they were in the military with this looming war after the school setting had kind of disappeared, because there's something about it that just did not connect with me, and I had a really hard time getting invested in the character. And though I am interested in picking up the sequel, it's definitely because I want to see where the war goes, and I want to see where the side characters end up, because they're the people I cared about. And after that, I'm going to be moving into my top 5 least favorite reads, with the exception of my number 1 least favorite read. The rest are pretty interchangeable, like 2 through 5 can, depending on the day, my rating will vary. In fact, I switched many of their positions a number of times before actually filming this. So number 5 was Before and Again by Barbara Delinsky. This was a kind of like a hard-hitting contemporary book, but I often had problems with Like, do I laugh at this part? Do I cry? It kind of had a bit of an identity crisis in terms of how it was dealing with the topic it was talking about. And I didn't really care for how they ended up mixing how this woman was dealing with her grief and how she was dealing with her friend and her friend's son while there was this ongoing investigation regarding her friend's son's actions. While each individual part of the book I enjoy, just the way they came together was just not something that I particularly cared for. Number 4 is Descendant of the Crane by Joan He, and honestly, the majority of my dislike of my read of this book was the ending. I enjoyed it up until they were trying to rush to get things done, and I thought because of that we were going to have some good resolution, and then we had the most open ending possible with no confirmed sequel, only potential companion novels, and I just would have been way happier with this book if I knew there was a sequel and I knew that there was resolution coming, because they really just left everything up in the air at the end of this book. That leads me to number 3, and it is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is, I think, another one of those classic sci-fi novels that I have been burned by this year. It seemed really interesting when I read the synopsis, but the way it was played out and the way the setting was done, I just didn't enjoy, even though I liked the idea of what he was commenting on in society. And it was not a good read, and I really didn't enjoy myself. Next, I'll move on to number 2. This was The Sixth Extinction by James Rollins. Part of this issue could have been that this wasn't the first book in this series, but I was kind of told by a number of reviews that you don't necessarily need to read the rest of the books in this series to understand what's going on or enjoy the book. And I mean, yeah, it was super action-packed, but I was really disappointed with the way that characters were described in this book. It didn't matter, man, woman, they were all described really sexually, and I felt really bad because they were all really capable otherwise, and I would have preferred to focus on their abilities, on their intelligence, but every time you met a new character, it always talked about their looks, and it got super aggravating after about the 3rd time it happened in the book, and that wasn't even, like, that was maybe 2 chapters in, and by the time I was done the book, I was just fed up with it. The science was really interesting in that book, though, so there's a positive. And then we come to number 1. This was my absolute least favorite read this year. It is the only book that I can confidently say will likely not switch places on my least favorite reads of all time, anytime soon. And it was The Star Is My Destination by Alfred Bester. I looked on Goodreads to see kind of what the rating was. It seems pretty well received, and when I read it, I was super disappointed. I couldn't connect with the main character. I couldn't connect with his motivations. I couldn't connect with the people he was supposedly working against. Every time I tried to find some way to get more invested or immersed in this book, it disappointed me yet again. I think I gave this book on Goodreads like 2 stars out of 5. I'm gonna force myself to reread it to see if I missed something, but honestly, I would not be surprised if I dropped my rating lower for this book. It was my least enjoyable book experience of the year, and unless you absolutely adore the story of the Count of Monte Cristo, I don't know that you would enjoy this book. It follows the story of the Count of Monte Cristo pretty well, but it's just more of a cyberpunk telling with a lot of futuristic elements built into the story, and I just did not enjoy it in the slightest. And with that said, I'm gonna stop because I could rant about this book and my lack of enjoyment for it for hours, and that doesn't need to happen. So I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!